Every single time you're online, you're leaving behind this trail of digital breadcrumbs. But have you ever stopped to think, who actually controls that trail? Well, today we're going to break down a really important law in the UAE that's all about putting you back in the driver's seat when it comes to your personal data. I mean, just think about your day so far. That ride-sharing app you used to get to work, the food you ordered for lunch, the news site you were scrolling through on your break. Every single one of them collected a little piece of your data. And once you hand it over, who's really in charge? That's the big question, right? And it's the exact question this new law is here to answer. So here's what we've got on tap. We're going to start with the law itself. Then we'll get to know the key players. After that, we'll dive into your rights, the new rules for businesses, and how they're supposed to keep your data safe. And of course, we'll wrap it all up by talking about why this really matters to you.
Okay, let's dive right in. The official name is Federal Decree by Law Number 45 of 2021. But look, what you really need to know is that this isn't just some small update. No way. This is the UAE's first ever comprehensive federal law that's all about protecting your personal data.
And trust me, this is a huge deal. See, before this law, data protection was kind of a patchwork of different rules here and there. But this law, which kicked in on January 2nd, 2022, changes all that. It creates one single, powerful standard for the whole country.
All right, so before we jump into all the cool rights you have, we kind of need to get on the same page with the lingo. Understand the language of the law. Let's quickly break down the key terms and who's who in this whole system.
First up, personal data. So what does this even mean? Well, the law says it's basically anything that can be used to identify you as a person. And yeah, we're talking about the obvious stuff, like your name or your picture, but it goes way deeper than that. It includes things like your location data, an online ID, even the sound of your voice. Okay, then the law carves out this special, extra protected category called sensitive personal data. And this is exactly what it sounds like. It's the stuff that's considered super private. We're talking about your health status, your political opinions, your family life, that kind of thing. And as you can probably guess, the rules for handling this type of data are way, way stricter. Now, when it comes to businesses, the law defines two main roles. First, you've got the controller. Think of them as the ones who decide the why and the how of using your data. Then you have the processor. This is a company that handles data on behalf of the controller, like, say, a cloud storage service. The easiest way to remember it is this. The controller is in the driver's seat, making the decisions. The processor is just following their directions. Okay, let's get to the good stuff. The part that's all about you, your rights. The law actually has a name for you, the data subject. And it gives you this whole new, powerful toolkit to take back control of your own information. And this is really the core of it. You now have a whole bunch of legally protected rights. You have the right to know exactly what's happening with your data, the right to actually see it, the right to get it corrected or even completely erased. You might have heard of this as the right to be forgotten. You can even tell a company, hey, stop using my data for your marketing emails, and they have to listen. So how do you actually use these rights? Well, it's pretty straightforward. Article 19 basically says you just contact the organization, the controller, directly. And here's the key. They are legally required to give you clear and simple ways to make these requests. So whether you want to see your data, fix a mistake, or just delete it, they have to make it easy for you. All right, so we've covered our rights. Now let's flip the coin and look at the other side. What does this law demand from businesses? Because believe me, there's a whole new playbook they have to follow now. Right at the very heart of this law is a core principle from Article 5. It says all data processing has to be fair, transparent, and lawful. What does that really mean? It means no more hiding what they're doing with your data on page 50 of the terms and conditions. Nope, it has to be upfront, honest, and clear. And to make sure that happens, the law lays out 8 key controls for processing data. These are the new ground rules. For instance, a company can only collect your data for a very specific, clear purpose, and they can't just hang on to it forever. Once they don't need it for that purpose anymore, it's gotta go. Your data can't just sit on some server collecting digital dust. Now, most of the time they need your consent. But the law's smart about this. It recognizes there are some exceptions. Article 4 lays out a few specific situations where your consent actually isn't needed. For example, if they need your data to fulfill a contract you signed, or for a legal case, or to protect the public. These are pretty logical, common sense exceptions. So we've got rights and businesses have rules. But what happens when things go wrong?
What about a data breach? Well, the law thought of that too. It sets up some really strong systems for security and a very clear plan for what to do when a breach happens.
A really big piece of this puzzle is the Data Protection Officer, or DPO. Article 10 says a lot of companies now have to appoint one. The best way to think of a DPO is like an internal data watchdog. Their job is to make sure the company is playing by the rules, and they're also the person you can contact or the authorities can contact if there's an issue.
So what happens if there is a breach? Article 9 lays out a very clear chain of command. The second a breach is discovered, the controller has to jump on it, investigate, and tell the authorities. And this is so important. If that breach puts your privacy at high risk, they are required to notify you personally.
Okay, we've gone through a lot of the details, so let's zoom out for a second and get to the big picture. Why does any of this actually matter to you in your day-to-day life? Look, if there's one single thing you take away from all this, let it be this. This law is a fundamental power shift. For a long, long time, the balance was tipped way in favor of companies. This law completely levels the playing field. It puts control firmly back where it belongs, in your hands. It gives you the power to ask the tough questions, to demand action, and to hold these organizations accountable.
So, we'll leave you with this final thought. The next time an app asks for permission to access all your contacts, or a website pops up asking you to just accept all cookies, stop and remember, you have rights now. So the real question isn't whether you have them. It's, now that you know what they are, what are you going to do about it?